Today we're going to be graphing square roots. So let's take a look at families of radical functions. So a parent function is the square root of x or the nth root of x. A reflection over the x-axis means we have a negative radical sign. Stretch means it getting bigger is when our a value, which is the coefficient in front, is greater than 1, and it's going to shrink if it's larger than 0 but less than 1. A translation horizontal, meaning moving left and right, is when we have the square root of x minus h, where if we're adding, we're going to be moving to the left, and if we're subtracting, we're going to be moving to the right. A translation vertical, meaning up and down, so we have the square root of x plus k. So let's take a look at our first example. We want to graph y equals the square root of x, which is the parent function, and y equals the square root of x plus 2. So let's start using our parent function. Let's create a table. So if we plug in the value, remember we know we can't take the square root of a negative number. So if we plug in our first, which is 0, the square root of 0 is 0. The next perfect square is 1, so the square root of 1 is 1. And then the next perfect square is 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. So let's graph our parent function. So we have 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. So this is our parent function. So let's take a look at this one. We have the square root of x plus 2. So we're adding this one. So this is going to be a vertical move. So this is going to shift up 2 units. And make sure we write down what's going to happen to the graph. So now let's create our graph. So we're still working with the square root, so we can't have negatives. So the first perfect we can do is 0. So 0, square root of 0 is 0, but then plus 2 makes it 2. Square root of 1 is 1, plus 2 is 3. We know we can't do 2 or 3, so the square root of 4 is 2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So now we can graph that. So we have 0, 2, 1, 3, 4, 4. So if we look, this whole graph has been shifted up 2 units. So let's look at our next one. I still want to graph our parent function even though it doesn't say to. So we still want to graph y equals the square root of x. So we know 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. That won't change. So here's my parent function. So now let's take a look at this one. This one we have the square root of x plus 3 for our radicand. So remember that's going to be our horizontal. Since we're adding 3, this is going to shift left 3 units. Alright, so let's look at our table. So we know we want to have our first one to be 0. So in order for our radicand to be 0, x needs to be negative 3. And negative 3 plus 3 is 0, and the square root of 0 is 0. Our next one, perfect square we want is a 1. So in order for our radicand to be 1, x needs to be a negative 2. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. Then our next perfect square, which is 4. So we want our radicand to be 4, so x needs to be 1, because 1 plus 3 is 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. Let's see if we can fit one more into our graph, because we can go out to 6. So our next perfect square after 4 is 9. So right now, in order for our radicand to be 9, x needs to be 6. 6 plus 3 is 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So let's graph. We have 0, negative 3, negative 2, negative 3, 0, sorry. Negative 2, 1, 1, 2, and 6, 3. So as you can see for this one, it's shifted horizontally to the left. So this is the square root of x plus 3. Let's look in the back one. Again, let's graph our parent function first, just so we can see what it looks like compared to our translated graph. So we have 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. Alright, so let's take a look and see what happens to this graph. So this one, we have our negative coefficient out front, so this is going to reflect over the x-axis. Oops, I don't know why I put it. Reflect over the x-axis, and we're doing a -1, which is not under our radicand, so this means we're going to shift down 1 unit to start. So we have xy. So once again, we know we can start with 0. So the square root of 0 is 0, and -1 times 0 is 0. So this is a -1. The square root of 1 is 1, but it's a -1. And -1 minus 1 is a -2. The square root of 4 is 2 times by a -1, so we have -2 minus 1, which is a -3. So if we graph, we have 0, -1, 1, -2, and 4, -3. So as you can see, it's been reflected, and it's shifted down. So this is the negative square root of x minus 1. Alright, let's look at our next one. Parent function. So we're going to have 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. So this is square root of x. So let's take a look at this one. First of all, we have a coefficient, our a is 2, so this is going to stretch. We have x minus 1 under our radicand, so this is going to shift right 1 unit, and then it's also going to shift down 3 units for our first point. Alright, so remember, we still want our first perfect one, our radicand, to be 0. So if we plug in a 1 for our x, 1 minus 1 is 0. Square root of 0 is 0. 2 times 0 is 0. Minus 3 is a -3. So then we want 1. So that means x needs to be 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. 2 times that 1 is 2. And 2 minus 3 is a -1. So then 4. If we plug in a 5, 5 minus 1 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. And 2 times 2 is 4, minus 3 is 1. So if we graph this, we're going to have +1, -3. +2, -1. And +5, +1. So here you can see the stretch that's going on. So this is 2 square roots of x minus 1 minus 3. And our first point shifted down 3 and to the right 1 unit. Alright, this last one we're going to change just a little bit. We are going to graph -2 square roots of x plus 2 plus 1. So again, let's start with our parent function. So we have 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. That's the square root of x. This one, it's going to reflect over the x-axis. It is going to stretch. It's going to shift to the left 2 units. And it's going to shift up, 1 unit. Alright. So remember, our first one, we want our radicand to be 0. So that means x needs to be a -2. -2 plus 2 is 0. Square root of 0 is 0. -2 times 0 is 0. Plus 1 is 1. So then we want our radicand to be 1. So if x is a -1, -1 plus 2 gets us 1. The square root of 1 is 1. -2 times 1 is -2, and -2 plus 1 is a -1. And then we want our radicand to be 4. So if x is 2, 2 plus 2 is 4, the square root of 4 is 2. Negative 2 times 2 is a negative 4, and negative 4 plus 1 is a negative 3. So let's graph that one. So we have negative 2, 1, negative 1, negative 1, and positive 2, negative 3. So it reflected, but it also shifted to the left 2 units, and it also went up 1. So this is negative 2 square roots of x plus 2 plus 1.